Hi, everyone. Imagine you were standing on the shore of Cape Cod in 1620 with some pilgrims and said, "We're from the future, and the land on which you're standing will become part of a country that will extend 3,000 miles to the west, all the way to the Pacific." Well, that pilgrim would probably find that hard to believe, right? But that's what happened, isn't it? And one of the great themes of American history is our expansion to the west. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Gadsden Purchase, which was a little piece of land in southern Arizona and New Mexico that we bought from the Mexicans in 1853. And it was on this date that President Pierce signed the legislation for that, June 24, 1853. And the Gadsden Purchase, while not very large compared to places like Louisiana, was very important because it revealed some of the tensions in our country in the 1850s, some of which will eventually lead to the Civil War in 1861. Here's the map of how our country spread from east to west, and the Gadsden Purchase is that little blue part north of Mexico, where Arizona, New Mexico, Texas are. So part of the backstory to this is in the 1820s, 30s, 40s, how do you get out west? Well, you could take a boat around the tip of South America, and that was fraught with all kinds of peril. You could also take one of the famous trails, like the Oregon Trail or the Santa Fe Trail, but that was hard too. It took about 4 months. You could be subject to extreme weather, uh, other kinds of surprises. You think of the Donner Party getting stranded in the mountains of California. So there was talk of a railroad to the west in the 1840s, but that never really got off the ground for various reasons. In 1846, we go to war with Mexico. There's fighting in Mexico, fighting in California, fighting in what becomes Texas. And the president at the time, our 11th president, pictured here, James K. Polk, he was a big expansionist, and he thought that the expansion of the United States was really important. And just so happens his name is on this cornerstone of the Custom House in Boston, which is not something you'd expect in Boston, I guess. And Lee and Grant, pictured here at Appomattox in 1865, were young officers in the Mexican War, so they knew each other from that. And a lot of the Civil War generals had fought in Mexico. So the pink is the land we get from the Mexicans. The Gadsden Purchase area is south of the pink in Arizona, so that's not part of the country yet. In 1849, gold is discovered in California. It's where the 49ers get their name. And many people move out to California to search for gold. In 1850, California becomes a state as part of the Compromise of 1850. So we're compromising between North and South, and this reveals some of the tension between North and South at the time period. So enter James Gadsden, South Carolinian railroad guy, wants to build a railroad to California for the South's economic interest, realizes that southern Arizona, the green part here, would be a lot easier to build a railroad, but it belonged to Mexico. Many of his fellow Southerners were not that interested in a railroad to the west. King Cotton was the economic powerhouse in the South, and it tended to be a coastal or a river economy. You'll notice on this map from 1860, the dark are the plantations along the Mississippi and along the coast. So a Western railroad didn't interest them that much. Santa Anna is in charge of Mexico, and a lot of Americans don't trust him, partly because they remember the Alamo and the Texas War of Independence. So one of the big areas of dispute was this area, the Mesilla Valley, which is where the Rio Grande falls into El Paso. The surveying lines were not clear, and there was just a lot of tension there. So Gadsden, who's now our ambassador to Mexico, is tasked to go to Mexico and buy as much of northern Mexico as he can. But the U.S. Congress is split over what's going to be known as the Kansas-Nebraska Act. There's a lot of fear of southern expansion on the part of Northerners because they thought it would be more slave territory. So they only supported the purchase of a little bit of North Mexico. They were afraid that if a lot of North Mexico joined the Union, it would become slave as opposed to free. Well, the railroad is built eventually, the Blue Line, but not until the 1880s. The Civil War slowed down a lot of this railroad building. So 1850s, more and more tension in the country. Politicians are looking for solutions, but nothing is easy. And eventually the Civil War will come in 1861.